Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling a big one today, understanding our environment.
Yeah, it's definitely front and center these days.
Totally. Our source is this really interesting English language learning podcast that's been, exploring environmental issues. And our goal, basically, to pull out the key ideas and like the practical language for talking about how to protect our planet.
Which is so important.
Right. Because grasping these concepts lets you, the listener, join in on informed discussions and, make meaningful choices about the environment. Okay, let's get into it.
It's actually quite remarkable, isn't it, how even in a language learning setting, these fundamental environmental concepts really shine through.
Yeah.
It just highlights how sort of central these ideas are becoming to just everyday communication.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with some crucial vocabulary. The first term that really jumped out was sustainability. In this context, what's the sort of core idea?
Well, the podcast defines sustainability pretty clearly as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's about balance, really.
Balance, right. Finding a way to live and develop now that doesn't, mess things up for people down the line.
Right.
Deplete resources or wreck the planet.
Exactly. It's that long-term view.
They use a great example, too. Using renewable energy is an example of sustainability.
Perfect example.
So things like solar, wind power.
That fits right in. Ensuring resources aren't just used up.
Precisely. And what's interesting is how sustainability kind of acts as this overarching umbrella, right? It connects so many different environmental efforts. It's not just about one-off actions, but more like a fundamental shift in how we think about our relationship with the planet long term.
Makes sense. Okay, next up, pollution. We all sort of feel like we know what it means, but how did this podcast define it?
The source kept it quite direct. Pollution is basically the presence of harmful substances in the air, water, or land.
Simple enough.
Yeah, it covers those main areas where our activities can, cause harm. And the example they gave was quite vivid. Plastic waste contributes to pollution in the oceans.
Right. That image just sticks with you.
It really does. Seeing pictures of plastic in the ocean,
Yeah.
it makes the impact very real, tangible.
It does. And it's important to remember, I think, that pollution isn't just the visible stuff like plastic.
Good point.
It also includes things maybe we don't see as easily, like air pollutants from burning fossil fuels or chemical runoff into rivers.
Affecting water quality.
Yeah, it's a really multifaceted issue, pollution, with pretty far-reaching effects on ecosystems and, frankly, our own health.
Okay, the last key vocabulary term they flagged was carbon footprint. We hear this one all the time. Can you break that down for us? What does it really mean?
Sure. So carbon footprint refers to the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted because of human activities,
Okay.
especially activities related to travel and energy use. Think of it like a measure of your contribution or maybe a company's contribution to climate change through releasing those gases.
Right, like CO2 and others. The example was flying in airplanes increases your carbon footprint.
Yep, that's a classic one.
Makes immediate sense, right? Given how much fuel planes burn. So activities needing lots of energy, especially non-renewable energy, mean a bigger footprint.
Exactly. And it's not just flying. It's things like heating our homes, especially with gas or oil.
Driving cars.
Driving gasoline cars, absolutely. And even the energy used to make and transport all the stuff we buy, it all adds up. Understanding your footprint helps you see where, maybe you could cut back a bit, reduce that impact.
Right, where the biggest chunks are coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, so the source material also included this short dialogue. Two friends talking about a new recycling program.
Yeah, I remember that bit. What's neat about that dialogue is how it takes these, sometimes abstract ideas.
Like sustainability.
Exactly, and grounds them in a really practical, everyday situation. Very relatable.
So what were the key things from that chat?
Well, one key thing was the mention of initiatives.
Initiatives, okay.
In the context of the recycling program, an initiative is just a specific plan or action, right? Designed to improve something. In this case, boosting recycling, cutting down waste.
Gotcha. And they use the line, we need more initiatives like that to reduce pollution.
Precisely. So initiatives are those proactive steps, things communities or governments, or even just groups of people do to tackle environmental problems hands-on.
So it highlights the need for organized effort, not just individual hopes.
Exactly. Tangible actions.
The dialogue also mentioned lowering my carbon footprint. How did the friends in the conversation show that? What were they doing?
Right. So one of them talked about using reusable bags and water bottles.
Ah, the simple stuff.
Yeah. But it connects directly back to what we just discussed about carbon footprint. By using less single-use plastic. Well, that plastic takes energy to make and transport.
So you cut down on those related emissions.
You got it. And later, they also mentioned using public transport more often, another way to lessen their impact. It just shows how our daily choices really do affect our footprint.
It's those everyday actions that make it click, I think. And then there was that really important line. Small changes can make a big difference. Why is that such a powerful message here?
Oh, that's crucial because it tackles that feeling of being overwhelmed, Like, what can I possibly do about climate change?
Yeah, feeling powerless.
Right. This message emphasizes that even if one person's action seems tiny, like using one less plastic bag, when lots of people do it, the combined effect is actually substantial.
The collective impact.
Exactly. It gives people a sense of agency, encourages everyone to pitch in. Environmental stewardship becomes like a shared thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, the source also gave us some really handy phrases, didn't it? For actually talking about the environment.
Yes, some very practical language tools.
What were some of the questions or action-focused statements that stood out?
Well, questions like, what can we do to protect the environment? That's a great conversation starter.
Yeah, open-ended.
Or, how can we make our community more eco-friendly? Again, invites ideas, collaboration.
Right, they get people thinking together. And what about the statements, the ones pushing for action?
Things like, we need to reduce waste. Pretty direct.
Mhm.
Or, renewable energy sources like wind and solar power are the future. That's a statement of belief, a direction.
And we should start using less plastic.
Yep. All clear, actionable ideas. They lay out specific steps or goals.
These are super useful phrases.
Yeah.
Anyone could, weave these into conversations. Now, there were also phrases specifically about taking personal responsibility, right?
Yes, focusing on individual commitment.
What were some of those?
Phrases like, I'm trying to live a more sustainable lifestyle, that shows personal effort and values.
Okay.
And then there's the question, have you considered going green? Which is sort of a gentle nudge, encouraging others.
Going green, yeah. And they explained that just means adopting environmentally friendly habits. Nice and simple.
Exactly.
Did they give examples of what going green looks like in practice?
They did. Very common, accessible things like, I try to recycle whenever I can.
Mm-hmm. Basic, but important.
And it's important to conserve water and electricity. Again, everyday actions that show that responsibility. Things most people can do.
Okay, so let's try and crystallize this. To really wrap up our understanding from this deep dive, what are the main takeaways we should hold on to?
I think the core things are, one, the need to actively reduce pollution, all kinds of pollution.
Right.
Two, making conscious choices to lower our carbon footprints, both individually and, as societies. And three, really embracing those broader ideas of sustainability, thinking long-term about planetary health.
And importantly, even though these challenges seem huge,
Yeah, they can feel daunting.
the source really hammered home that point about small actions, didn't it? That little adjustments in our daily lives really do add up. They can lead to significant positive impact over time.
Absolutely. It's all about that collective effort. Everyone chipping in whatever way they can. It's not about being perfect overnight.
Right, not some impossible ideal.
No, just making consistent progress. Every deliberate choice towards, a more sustainable way of living, it contributes to that bigger positive picture.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it feels pretty clear that understanding this key vocab and these practical phrases,
Yeah.
it gives you a really solid base for engaging with environmental issues.
Definitely.
And it really highlights the impact of individual actions when, they're multiplied across communities, across the globe. We talk about initiatives lowering your carbon footprint through everyday changes and lots of useful language.
And maybe for you, the listener, it's worth thinking, how do these ideas connect with your own life? Are there maybe some small practical changes you could consider? Or maybe chances to use some of these phrases when you're talking to people?
That's a really good point to reflect on. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Even those actions that seem tiny, like choosing the reusable cup over the disposable one, or maybe taking the bus sometimes instead of driving, they really do feed into a larger environmental story. So the question is, perhaps, what small step might you consider taking today, knowing that every little bit genuinely counts?